returning catamounts. It's very good to be with you tonight. My name is Annie Stevens. I'm the Vice Provost for Student Affairs. And tonight we wanted to offer you a session mostly about all of the requirements that we all need to follow as we prepare to get back onto campus and welcome you all back in the fall. Last week, the provost sent out a pretty big email that kind of went through a new option about staying at home for some students if they wish to do that. And then, of course, if students still wish to be on campus and in-person instruction, there's that option as well. So this evening, we have gathered some magic behind the scenes of people who have been working hard on our campus to make sure that we all are very safe and healthy as we come back and provide you these options and flexibility to make the experience what it can be, even though we're in such different circumstances as a community. So I am joined tonight by some wonderful folks who are going to walk you through first the stay-at-home option versus in-person. So academically, what will it look like? What will those choices be like for you? Then we will have our Director of Residential Life walk through if you choose to be on campus, sophomores particularly, or some juniors and seniors who have housing contracts. What will life be like in the residence halls? And then finally, we'll walk through what the requirements are upon your arrival, both pre-arrival all the way through move-in, whether it be on campus or off campus, and then some of our testing requirements. And then we're going to move into question and answer time. And then we'll try to spend a good deal of time making sure we're responding to your questions as you have them. So without any further ado, I'm going to go jump right to our first presenter, Dr. Bill Falls, who is the Dean of our College of Arts and Sciences. So Bill, you want to walk us through the academic options?
Happy to, Annie. Thank you very much. And thanks everybody for joining us. As Annie said, I'm Bill Falls, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, but in this capacity, I am serving as a member of the UVM Strong Fall Committee. And I've been specifically focusing on how do we return to academic operations in this fall. And as Annie mentioned, we announced last week, the provost announced that there is going to be another option for some of you, and that is being able to take your courses from home remotely. But I'll get to that in a minute. So if I could have the next slide. What I'd like to do is just give you a brief overview of what things will look like when you return to campus academically in the fall. And so we're going to be offering the full array of courses that you've come to expect. Courses in your major, gen ed courses, electives, things of that nature. But we realize that in order to focus on health and safety of our faculty, our students, and our staff, social distancing is going to be really important in the classroom. And those, you know very well what our classrooms are like. And so if you're thinking about, being in a classroom and imposing 6-foot social distancing, we're going to realize that, many of our classrooms are going to be have lower capacity. So in response to that, we've come up with 4 different formats for offering classes. There'll be the traditional in-person class. So this is the one that you're used to, where you come to class Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday. You're there with a faculty member. It's a lecture, it's a discussion, etc. We're also introducing, more online options. So these will be courses that are largely asynchronous. So you'll be engaging in these classes on your own time, viewing recorded videos and text and things of that nature. There'll also be what we're calling remote courses. These will be presented in a synchronous fashion. So they'll have a particular time when you would be required to be in class, kind of like if you were being in person, but you'll be viewing the class remotely via live stream. But probably the most frequent kind of class that we'll be offering is what we're calling mixed. And this is really a response to the fact that our classrooms are now going to hold fewer students. So really the mixed is a variety of different ways of presenting this. It's going to be a combination of in-person classwork, as well as the synchronous remote streaming kind of class. So pretty soon, when I get to the course schedule, the timeline, you'll see that on Monday, course schedules will go live, and you'll be able to see what your classes will look like, whether they'll be in person, online, remote, or mixed. I do want to point out, though, that for students who are coming back to campus, there's going to be the full array of lab, studio, practicum, and internship courses. They'll be different. They'll have to be, but those will be available to you in addition to the full array of academic kind of classroom-based courses. Importantly, academic advising, tutoring, writing support, library access, all the sort of support services that you've come to appreciate will continue to be offered. Many of them, most of them will be offered to you remotely. There will be some opportunity for in-person interaction around these. But again, in order to protect the health and safety of our entire community, a lot of those will be remote. Next slide, please. As the provost announced last week, we've introduced an at-home option. So you might elect to stay at home and continue your UVM education. And so with this, you will have access to those courses that are online or remote. You'll also have access to some courses that are delivered in a mixed format. Again, when the schedule of courses goes live on Monday, you'll be able to tell which of those courses are online and which are remote, and which are mixed and available to at-home students. It's important to know, though, for the at-home option, there'll be very limited options for lab, studio, and practicum and internship courses. As you can imagine, I mean, these really require kind of in-person activities. So you should be looking out for those, talking to your dean's office and student services folks if you need those courses or you want to participate in those, what might be available. Again, the at-home option will include all of the support services that we've come to expect and that are excellent at UVM. The important thing to also note for those who are interested in the at-home option is part of this is the opportunity to register for one 3-credit course in the summer of 2021, tuition free. So that's kind of a nice bonus for choosing the at-home option. So summer courses are really great for getting caught up, for exploring other courses that you might not want to take, or for getting ahead. Next slide, please. This is just the rundown of important dates. All of these were included in the email from the provost. As I mentioned, Monday, July 13th, the revised course schedule will be available for you to review. That's the first opportunity to see which courses are now in the remote, the online, the mixed, or the in-person modalities. On July 17th, all of those folks who are considering the at-home option, you need to specify whether or not you're going to choose that by the end of the day on July 17th. On the 20th, the schedule becomes available for those at-home students who have priority access. So these are our honors college students, varsity athletes, etc. But on the 21st, at-home students the rest of the at-home students get the opportunity to make adjustments to their schedule. If you're choosing at home, obviously you're going to want to adjust your schedule so that you have courses that are available to you remotely, and those will largely be the online and the remote courses, again with some mixed modality courses, the partial in-person, online courses. Those will be specified, the ones that are available to students who are choosing the at-home option. And then on the 23rd, the schedule adjustment period begins campus-wide for students with priority access. And so these are the students who are choosing to return to campus, so that you can begin to make adjustments in your schedule. So students with priority access will have the ability to adjust their schedules to sort of rebalance online, remote, in-person to your liking. And then on the 24th, the schedule opens up to the rest of the community to make those adjustments. So it's important that you consider contacting your dean's office for some advising as you work through the choices of whether or not you want to be at home or whether you want to come to campus and in person, and also around making choices to revise your schedule, because it's really, really important to us that you continue to progress towards your degree. And so those choices really should be informed by contacting advisors in your dean's office. So please do that beginning on July 13th. Once that that course schedule goes live with the different modalities, folks are ready and waiting for you to contact them. So do look up your dean's office and consider chatting with an advisor about the choices that you're going to be facing. So thank you.
And next, I want to walk us through a little bit about what we're going to hear next. So we're going to hear from Dr. Raf Rodriguez, Executive Director for Residential Life, about quarantining, how we're dedensifying the residence halls, and of course, health and safety. So Raf, if you could walk us through those three elements, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Annie. Good evening, folks. You've heard a bit from me in the past couple of weeks, and before we get into the section, really want to take the opportunity to genuinely give my sincere gratitude to all of the parents and family for what has been an overwhelmingly positive relationship over the past several months. We all have been in new territory for sure. It's been a nonstop marathon for many of us. We've been working hard alongside you, trying to figure it all out, from trying to identify and provide access for folks to pick up belongings, shipping of essential items, developing a process for emergency housing, refrigerator cleanouts, waiting for move out, planning move out, and executing move out. It has absolutely been a whirlwind for all of us. And the level of grace and understanding and positive messages you all have sent have meant the world to us, to me and my staff. So thank you for what's been a great partnership as we work with our over 5,700 students and families. So I appreciate that. So now let's get in, as Annie talked about, to focus on what is on-campus housing looking like for this upcoming semester. As we know, the UVM Strong Working Group, along with guidance from the Governor's Office, have established some clear expectations that will allow us to conduct in-person instruction, but also provide a residential living experience for the fall. I'm going to go over what that will look like by focusing on, again, these three sections: quarantine space, dedensification, and health and safety. With respect to quarantine space, what we are looking at is providing the opportune space for folks to isolate when found positive for the remainder of 7 to 8 days. And Michelle will talk a bit more about what that would look like. But what we're trying to identify is enough standalone spaces that we can allow students to have all the services they would need to in a space where they're also not getting anyone else sick. So the first goal and the first priority that was set to us was to identify these quarantine bed space. And go ahead, you can advance. And we've identified at the time currently up to 57 beds, and those spaces have been identified as Slade Hall and the cottages. As we know, we had a couple of students assigned to these spaces. We are working with these students, and we'll be working with them to reassign them. And because we are shifting their building placement and their building assignment, we will be working with them to make sure that we can, as much as possible, preserve their roommate preferences, but also, despite their being placed in a double, guarantee them the triple room rate which they're expecting, or as a way of recognizing the challenge. So that was our first goal, was identifying quarantine space. The next plan was dedensification. What is our plan for minimizing and lowering the volume and the number of concentration of folks in our residence halls? And we have employed a couple of strategies. What I want to spend some time talking with you tonight is one of the most important process and vehicles that we're going to do to dedensify, which is de-tripling of our residence halls. As we know, this was a bit easier for our first year students, as they have not been assigned to rooms yet. But for our returners, for all of you who have been assigned, we needed to come up with a process that was methodical, and our grounding principles were as follows. We want to make sure that in our process of de-tripling, we could have easily done it on our own in a matter of a couple of minutes, but we wanted to create and develop a process that provided as much choice as possible, minimize the impact on all of you, and incentivize also your participation. So we did that. And when we're talking about de-tripling, the communities specifically that we're referencing are the ones that follow. Again, you'll see sustainability, leadership and social change, honors college, innovation and entrepreneurship, outdoor experience, arts and creativity, and wellness environment. If you don't see your learning community listed here, that's because most likely you do not have triples in your learning communities, or the space within your learning community is suitable enough that we can de-triple and still keep you in your building. What we are developing is a process where students can opt to move. So instead of having to force anyone or place anyone, which is not our first or preferred method at all, we will develop and have developed a process that will begin sometime next week for students to opt to move into a new space. Now, the majority, the vast majority of students will be moving to Marsh and Austin, with some folks moving into open spaces that may become open across campus as we continue to honor the at-home options. We will do our best to do a couple of things. Keep folks within like learning communities on the same floor. We will also give students the opportunity to preference a roommate within their current learning community. So if you opt to move, we will allow you to preference a roommate within your learning community as well. In exchange, the incentive is if you're selected to move, we will place you in a double. Again, we will only bill you the triple room rate though. So it's a bit of an incentive for folks who decide to. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time getting into the details and answering some of the questions that we anticipate getting. So first, how will opting to move work? We are describing this similar to volunteering to give up your seat on an airplane. You have the opportunity to volunteer, and if selected and moved to a new building, you and your preferred roommate, if you have one, will be placed in a double room but billed the triple room rate in one of the locations we talked about, either Marsh, Austin, or space that becomes available, right? So the way it works right now is that in order for us to achieve our goal of de-tripling, each learning community has a set number of beds or population decrease that we have to achieve. That's why we're freezing all of our housing inventory so we can get this done in a timely fashion. So what we're allowing is anyone who's within that learning community who wishes to move along with one other person to opt into, and if selected, they'll be put into a new location and charged, again, the triple room rate. The next question, if I'm in a triple but my preferred roommate is in a double, can we both opt to move and select each other? Yes, you can. So again, our learning communities already confined populations, and the goal is to have each of those learning communities decrease by a specific number. So you two can move together. Next question. If I opt to relocate, can I preference a roommate from another learning community? Unfortunately, no. At the moment, this is not a trading spaces opportunity. However, we're working and looking into how to provide a lot more flexibility when you get to campus in the fall for body swaps and to do roommate pool-ins once you arrive. So again, what we're really trying to focus on is making sure we hit that target number to de-densify in each learning community. If we begin to allow folks to pull in roommates from other learning communities, we run a very high likelihood of being in the same position where we have possibly met everyone's desire to live with another person, but still have not met our goals of de-densification, which is what's driving all of this. What if I have no desire to relocate? That's absolutely fine. When you get to that part of the form, you will simply decline the option. The next question, I was assigned to a building, Slate or the cottages, that has been converted to and designated an isolation and quarantine space. What will happen to my room assignment? We will be in touch with you to relocate you, and as much as possible, again, preserve your roommate pair if you had one. And as a result of us relocating your building, you'll be billed at the triple room rate. So go back up to the first question, how will opt-in to move in work? I just want to stress that we will give that incentive to folks whose buildings are moved. We ordinarily generally do consolidation within the buildings. If your rooms changes, but you're still within the same learning community or the same building, that's not the conditions in which we will honor the triple room rate. But if we have to move you from one building to the next, which is not at all our standard practice or preferred practice, that's when, as a recognition of that shift and change, we will bill you at the triple room rate. So that's a bit about how the opt-in process is going to work. Let me talk a bit about what you can expect in the fall semester with respect to health and safety, because the experience will look a bit different, specifically as we're focusing on how to keep everyone safe. So as we talked about, we have a plan for the elimination of triple rooms. Folks who are in the residence halls will be required to wear masks at all times, except for when you are in your personal room. Now, a personal room is the room in which you live in and or the suite in which you live in. We will also be very intentional about providing strict guidelines and resources and cleaning supplies for folks in suites so that they are sharing and sanitizing common spaces as often as possible. For this fall, as per the governor's orders and our policy shift, we're also really clarifying our expectations and the requirements for guests and room occupancy. Specifically for guests, we're allowing no more than 4 students in any given room at any given time. We also are prohibiting any non-affiliated or students and staff or anyone who does not work within the university to visit the residence halls. Okay. We have shared common spaces. We want to make sure that to the extent possible, we can take advantage of those. We have kitchen in some of our buildings. We have study rooms. We will still work on making those available. However, we will be very clear and concise in providing the appropriate resources and protocol to have those all cleaned. We also will be putting some occupancy limits into those spaces, and all the occupancy limits will be strictly enforced.
For those of you who will be living on campus, the dining experience will be a little different. And those of you who are living off campus but are participating in getting meals or snacks while on campus, this is good information for you to have as well. So a lot of what dining services will be needing to do is actually through mobile ordering. You will be able to have an app to help you do a mobile order and then pick up at whatever location you sent your order to. We're also going to be reducing lines at retail sites, like in the Davis Center and other parts of the campus. In any of the areas, especially in the residential dining halls, we'll need to move the furniture and spread it all out so there's 6-foot distancing. We're putting up plexiglass so students can still be next to each other and have conversation, but feel a little bit more safe and be safer in those environments. And then students may be required to actually, even during certain meal times, reserve a seat if they want to be in a residential dining area. And what's really, really great is that we're still able to keep our EcoWare program going. I hope you and encourage you to participate in the EcoWare program, because that's a wonderful way that we can still provide takeout meals and takeout food at higher levels, and yet still meet the values of being sustainable without going through lots of packaging. And then, of course, any of the allergies that need to be addressed will be addressed still. And you can always contact the nutritionist through dining services. So dining's going to be a little different, a lot of takeout, a lot of pre-ordering. And if you're in actually isolation areas, meals will be delivered to you. And that's the only time. Otherwise, you'd be picking up a lot. So you're going to have to kind of grab and go, pick up a meal, and then go somewhere else on campus, outside or somewhere else to have your meal. So that's a little bit about dining and what that's going to look like. But I think you can probably imagine 6-foot distancing and trying to keep everything clean. We'll probably have to close the residential dining halls in between meals because they'll do an extra cleaning in between certain meal segments. So lots of different things. I encourage you to keep an eye on hours and make sure that you have all that and download the app on your computer, on your phone, so you're kind of kept up to date about what dining looks like. We'll go to the next slide. So now we're going to enter that portion of this presentation and kind of talk you through what will happen next. And really, this is starting in August. So let's picture early August together. And some of you might be moving into your off-campus apartments. But no matter where you're living, you're going to be asked to do a mandatory online training that's going to be sent to you through Blackboard. You have to take this in order to participate on campus, or your CAT card will be turned off, and the CAT card, as you know, gets you into all kinds of things. But the online training should be quick. It's like 10 minutes. The Green and Gold Promise, which is all of the different requirements that we all as a community members will be adhering to. Faculty, staff, and students all need to kind of really, truly rally together and make this happen as a community and make us all safe as a community. So that training will walk you through that. Staff and faculty have to take the same training. But at the end, I really want to encourage you to make sure you're reading through the entire Green and Gold Promise and signing off on that, because that's really what you're going to adhere to be a member of the community this fall. And then we'll talk through the quarantine requirements. So if you're coming from distances from farther away than inside Vermont, then what does that mean, and how can you quarantine, and what are your options to do that to get here safely? Raph will come back in and talk a little bit more about move-in, and how we're going to try to do that safely and stagger move in. So not a lot of people are kind of trying to move in at once. And then finally, we'll go through our testing protocols, what will be happening through the rest of the semester once you arrive, and then the rest of the semester. So let's start off with Gary Durr, who will introduce himself and talk about quarantine.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gary Durr, the Vice President for Operations and Public Safety, and it's great to be back with you again tonight to talk more about the various elements involved in returning to campus for fall 2020. I have the complex job of trying to explain to you the various requirements regarding quarantining and what you need to do to arrive in advance. When we met last, and some of you participated in that meeting, I outlined what I thought would be the procedures required involved in it. Earlier this week, Governor Scott, the governor of the state of Vermont, announced the various quarantine requirements that are in place for students for returning to Vermont. So let me talk about those students that need to quarantine. This is basically long distance requires that you stop in a public lodging or take public transportation before getting to campus. So if you live in Colorado and you need to stop halfway between here and there, as you're driving out, or you're flying, say, from California, you fall into this need, in that you can't depart from your home and arrive directly at UVM. So where can you quarantine? You can choose to quarantine at a private residence in Vermont. It can include your off-campus apartment, and that can be for 14 days of quarantine or for 7 days with proof at the end of that period of time that you've tested negative for COVID-19. Burlington, the city of Burlington's offered some great support for those on this call that are living off campus to provide support for you during that quarantine period. Those of you that need to quarantine can also choose to do that in a lodging, at a hotel in the Burlington area, Airbnb, or any one of those options. It can include hotels and short-term rental options, but you would need to quarantine for 14 days at that site or for 7 days with proof of a negative test at the end of it. Or for those students that are living on campus, we're going to be making available the option to quarantine on campus in a residence hall. And that will take place for days prior to you moving back into your permanent assignment. So what you'll do to be able to do, what you'll do is on August 14th, you'll move into your permanent site, unload your belongings, and move to the quarantine site, and you'll be there for 7 days. And at the end of the 7th day, you'll get a test, and once we get confirmation it's negative, you'll be able to move back into your permanent site. During that time, all of your meals will be provided in that location at no cost and covered by your meal plan. So those are the three options if you have to quarantine, either in a private residence in Vermont, at a lodging property, or for on-campus students, the option of doing it in one of our residence halls. Next. There's also the need to quarantine if you're in a drivable distance to University of Vermont without stopping anywhere public other than for gas or to get a meal. You have the option to quarantine at home for at least 14 days. So if you agree to that, you need to quarantine at your home, and we're going to ask you to sign that you did indeed quarantine for those 14 days. Or you have the option of quarantining at home for 7 days and then getting tested in your home county or home city, whoever manages the testing in your site, and you physically prove that you have a negative COVID-19 test after 7 days, excuse me. Next. No need for quarantine. Vermonters, anybody coming from Vermont and you've been in Vermont for the past 14 days, you can drive from your home in Vermont to UVM and begin either living off campus or on campus. In addition, the Vermont Department of Health has set up a series of criteria for students coming from what are called safe counties. And we put the link up there and it'll also be in the chat, which has a site that lists those counties across most of the Northeast, all the way out through Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, and then all of New England. The formula that they use to determine if it's considered a safe county or a trusted county, that there are 400 cases per million in that state or less, which is equivalent to what we have in all of our counties in Vermont. So if you go on the site and you look up and you can scroll over that, and it's updated every Friday, find the county that you live in, and then determine whether you need to quarantine or not. That covers the quarantine strategies, and I'd be happy to answer any questions when we go to that period.
So Gary talked a bit about quarantine requirements. Once we get past the quarantine requirements, you've either met them or you're prepared to move into campus. What we've done is, what we will offer is a set of days for you to choose from in order to move in. We are going to offer every student 4 days, a 4-day window, of which they can automatically select to move in. Each day has 2 blocks, a morning block and an afternoon block. Depending on which residence halls you're in, it will define your day. So for the vast majority of folks on campus, you'll be able to move in between Tuesday, August 25th and Friday, August 28th. The only exception is University Heights North and University Heights South, which will be utilized for quarantining space. And we want to make sure we have enough time to have those buildings professionally cleaned and disinfected. Students who are moving into University Heights North and University Heights South will be able to move in between Wednesday, August 26th and Saturday, August 29th. Each building, in order for us to make sure we can support a safe and effective move-in process, will be capped by time block of how many folks can sign up for that specific move-in schedule or move-in block. We have adjusted it to be 15% of the building's occupancy at any given time. This will allow us to make sure that we have enough time to coordinate testing properly, enough separation between folks, and enough time for folks to plan accordingly in between to clean our high traffic areas and make sure that, again, moving is going along smoothly and as healthy and safe as possible.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Pavla. I am the Medical Director of Student Health Services at the Center for Health and Wellbeing, and I get to talk to you about our testing protocol. So first, let me talk about the tests. There's a lot of tests out there, so I just want to be clear that the type of the test we'll be using when you arrive and throughout the semester is the test that checks to see if you have the RNA2, the SARS-CoV-2 virus in your nose. So this is a non-invasive test that the student collects themselves by inserting a small swab about 1 centimeter inside each nostril. This takes about 10 seconds per nostril, then you're done. We're contracting with an outside company to process the samples, and we anticipate having the results from the tests within 24 hours. So UVM is going above and beyond the governor's requirements. So for early detection of the virus that causes COVID-19, we will be screening all students with a test when they arrive and twice a week thereafter.
Thanks, Michelle. So I'll take a bit of time to go over our timeline of how we move forward and important dates you should keep in mind. The first is to know that next week we will open up our quarantine move-in and move-in time, and also opting to move form. I absolutely understand that at this point you are absolutely formed out. You have been filling out forms nonstop, so we do understand that. And we are going to try to make this as comprehensive as possible to capture everything in one space. In this form, you'll be able to, again, go through and identify your quarantine needs, if you're going to meet the requirement or not. You'll be able to select and opt into quarantining on campus if that's an option you're interested in. You'll be able to opt into moving from your residence hall, the detripling process we talked about, and preference of roommate. You will also be able to select your move-in times. We're going to try to put all those 5 pieces into one form so that we don't keep coming back to you and asking you to fill out multiple forms. The next date to keep in mind is August 3rd. That is when we'll come out and confirm your roommate and your new room assignment. You'll be ready with all the information you need and able to just confirm that your preference was met. That's also when you figure out if you were selected to be relocated to a new building and you'll be charged a triple rate or not. On August 14th, as Gary talked about, that is the day for anyone needing to quarantine or expecting to quarantine on campus to report. That's a fixed date. It's not a flexible date. It's a date in which you're going to have to move into campus, begin your quarantine so that you're able to get tested in 7 days and have enough time to move back into your room. And then again, the general student move-in will begin the week of the 25th through the 29th.
Great. So that was a lot of information. So now we're going to walk through many of the questions that you have already submitted, and know that you don't have to resubmit questions either. We'll try to get to as many as we can, and I'll try to do my best at reading them off and then choosing from our wonderful experts here in the presentation who best to respond to each question. I think we answered this one, but I'm going to start right off with this short one, which is what happens if a student tests positive right before traveling to campus? Well, they probably shouldn't come to campus. Like if you test positive and you are sick, then don't show up to campus. You need to stay home. You need to get well, take care of yourself. Let us know, let your academic dean's office know that that's what happened, and stay home, quarantine, get well, and then let us know when you're going to come back. But nobody should be showing up to campus not feeling well or testing positive. The next question, I believe Raf just went through this, but what date should out-of-state students who are required to quarantine have chosen to quarantine in the halls arrive on campus? It's right there in front of us. It's the August 14th date. That is a solid confirmed date for lots of different reasons that we've had to choose that date for you to arrive. And the cost of being in the quarantine, I do believe that residential life, your housing may not be charged, but we are still considering what date the meal plans will begin. So there may be a cost for meals during that time until the meal plan contract actually starts a little later. So we'll get back to you about what those costs really will be. Oh, and there's the August 14th answer. Can you explain the process for a positive test on campus and if identified as a close contact trace, isolation time, and or quarantine time? Michelle, do you want to take that for us?
Sure. So we're testing both through the screening process, and we'll be testing students who develop symptoms throughout the semester. When somebody is identified as positive, we inform them right away and get them into isolation housing if they're symptomatic, or quarantine if they don't have symptoms but have a positive test. Isolation, the timeline for that is about 10 days from the start of your symptoms. During that isolation period, we will check in with you every day with a phone call and make sure you're doing all right. Get your meals delivered to you. Contact tracing starts at the time of the positive test too, so we will try to get in touch with all of your close contacts. If you have a roommate, we're going to test them right away. Roommates who are positive, you will be put in isolation. If you're negative, but you've been a close contact, this is really confusing, so I apologize. But if you're a close contact, identified as close contact, you'll be asked to quarantine. So that quarantine is most likely going to be 7 days with a test at day 7. There is the option to do a full 14-day quarantine, but I think most people will opt for the 7-day option.
Great. Thanks, Michelle. We'll go back to a question which I really appreciate this question. Matter of fact, I was in a meeting today trying to think through how we can help folks figure out their quarantine requirement. And this question is that, which is, could there be a, ask questions on a website that gives you a final answer about what you're required to do for quarantining, sort of a dichotomous key item. So we will look into that. That sounds great, but also might be tricky when we start thinking about safe counties, and those might change over time. So Gary, I don't know if you want to chime in any more than that about how best to help people with the quarantine question, but I know that that is a big question that we're getting.
Yeah, thank you, Annie. I saw that question earlier, and we'll look into that. I think that, as I said earlier, it's a little bit of a complex set of questions, but let us give some thought to that, because I think that, you know, we learned last night with the session with incoming students, new students, that this is probably one of the more complex set of issues and questions that people are struggling with. So give us some time and let us look into see whether we can create something like that.
Great, thanks, Gary. And this next question is also about a family traveling to Vermont mid-August for vacation and quarantining at home before they get to Vermont as required. After 1 to 2 weeks in Vermont, they'll drop off the student at UVM. And since he will only be in Vermont during that time, is he free to move in without an additional quarantine? I would say yes, Gary. I think as long as they're, no, is it a no? Oh, he's shaking his head. What do you got?
So I think there's an element of that will work. But see, the person's originally coming from out of state to Vermont. They're going to need to quarantine in Vermont for 14 days as a visitor to Vermont, or 7 days and get a negative test and then come in. But they can fulfill their quarantine in Vermont if they choose to. But Great. It's the originating county or location that's going to drive what they need to do in order to come to campus clear.
Right, okay. And I see that Joshua also posted in the link here the Safe Counties map and the Green and Gold Promise. Thank you, Joshua. Very helpful. Another question, can underclassmen who have apartments in Burlington choose the at-home option? Is this option going to be available in the spring semester? Actually, the students who choose at home need to be taking classes from home. This is not a live in Burlington moment. We are trying to de-densify not only the residence halls, but also the Burlington community. So if you're taking that option, you do need to live at home, and the provost has been very clear about that. Bill, anything more to say on that one?
No, the only thing I would add is that, you know, one of the things that's going to happen when you elect the at-home option is your CAT card is going to be turned off. So even if you did choose it from, you know, from a local residence, you wouldn't have access to any of the on-campus facilities.
Okay, thanks for that addition. Am I going to lose my spot in classes? Oh, the other part of that question was, is this option going to be available in the spring? We just don't know yet, right, Bill? We don't know what the options will be in the spring. I think it depends upon how fall will go.
Yeah, that's right, Annie. You know, we're only beginning to think about the spring, and so right now this is just a fall option.
Okay, thanks so much. Next question is, am I going to lose my spot in classes? I'm already signed up to people with priority access to classes who are choosing classes from home. Or am I still signed up for the classes I signed up for in the spring? Bill, what do you think about signing up for classes in the spring and the changes now?
Yeah, so students are in the classes that they've elected. It's a little tricky for the students who are choosing the at-home, because obviously courses that are taught solely in person, and a good number, maybe the majority of the mixed classes won't be available to them because they require being on campus. So for the at-home students, you know, they will really need to look carefully at their schedule and make sure that they're electing courses that are online or remote or specified mixed courses that are available to them. But for students who are returning to campus, your schedule is your schedule, and it's really up to you whether you want to change the classes based on the balance of mixed, in-person, remote.
Great, thanks, Bill. And this next question is about living off campus. Gary, you might help me with this one a little bit around the guidelines, but I think for the most part, for students living off campus, sure, they're in a house, they might be living with other students that they feel safe and comfortable. They've done everything to quarantine to be there. And then if they have group gatherings, they will be considered in violation of the Green and Gold Promise. I think they will be if they're not wearing masks, if they're over the certain number of gatherings. Those will be things that students need to watch for. They can't be hosting a large gathering where people are not social distancing or wearing masks. That will be definitely an issue that will violate the Green and Gold promise. Gary, do you want to add anything to that about the size?
The only thing, yeah, that was accurate what you said. The only one thing I would add is that Burlington has a facial covering requirement in town, as does South Burlington. So you should be aware of that as well, too.
Great. And then, Michelle, does a student still need to quarantine if they are considered an essential worker?
Yes, depending on the situation.
Okay. Yeah, even if whatever their job is, they need to quarantine to get here, no matter what their employment will be. Yep. Can commuter students still take in-person classes? Sure, right, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, for commuter students, it's as if you were in residence in Burlington or in the dormitories.
Yep. Will allergy shots be provided? Michelle, do we provide allergy shots to students?
We do. We have an allergy clinic, and that will be fully operational.
Great. And what about on-campus transportation if you have a child living on Trinity campus? Well, we're not going to be running the campus shuttles during the daytime hours. We will be running them in the evenings, and we'll certainly be running them in the daytime for people who have accommodation needs for transportation, but all students will be walking. We're going to go back to the days of walking across campus, and if the student is living on Trinity, then they might want to just start a little earlier. And actually, fun fact, Trinity is the same distance to the main campus as Redstone is to the main campus. So even though you kind of can't see it from the main campus, it's about the same distance. So students are going to get some exercise in here this fall. Are people not in triples guaranteed their current room assignment? Raph, what do you think?
Not necessarily their current room assignment. They again will have the opportunity to opt into moving, or they can determine to say, I don't want to opt into moving, I want to stay in my same space. We will do our best to keep them in the same building. Their room assignment might switch if their other roommates choose to move. If two of them choose to move out and opt for the move and they remain there, they might be assigned a roommate or be themselves reassigned to another space with an opening in it. So again, it's up to you and which option you choose. You'll either be within the building with the potential of moving around, a bit of shifting, and or you can opt into leaving the building with the incentives that we talked about.
Okay, thanks, Raph. Gary, here's one. What if I am not in a safe county, but my town has 0 positive cases?
So what we're having to rely on, excuse me, is the information that's generated by the Agency of Community Commerce Development by the state, and they rely on data that's coming out of Johns Hopkins. So, and they refresh that Friday, so every Friday. So I would say keep checking that site. If your county now is indeed 0 positive cases, I would continue to look at that site to see if they don't update that.
Yeah, we'll be keeping a close eye on that site and following that. Thanks, Gary. Are you going to create more places for students to eat indoors between classes during the winter? We'll be trying to figure out like what those spaces are. Right now, the priority has been making sure there's enough space for academic classes to be happening, both in larger spaces so that students can spread out with the faculty member. And then once that gets decided, a lot of our spaces we'll try to designate as places where people can hang out between classes and still keep distance, or for dining purposes as well. So stay tuned on that question. Academic question is the schedules are updating, which is great. It seems like several science classes with labs have the lecture listed as remote, but still have the lab assigned to a room. Is it likely that labs will be in person, even if the lecture is remote? Well, most of the science classes also have a remote lab option, so they can be taken by students choosing the at-home option. Bill, did you get all that?
I did, Annie, thank you. And we are working to make lab courses accessible to at-home students. It is a bit of a challenge. We've been successful with introductory chemistry, introductory biology, but some of the upper level lab courses are going to be a bit of a challenge. I think it's important for students who are majoring in those areas to talk to their academic advisor, to talk to their dean's office, to see whether or not those labs may be accessible in an at-home option, or whether there may be some substitution.
Okay, and the next question, Bill, I don't know if you see it there, but it's about a daughter who was informed last week that as a rising sophomore, fully online program would not interrupt her progression in the nursing program. But she goes on to talk about microbiology. You want to answer that one?
Yeah, I'm not intimately familiar with the programming that's going on in the College of Nursing and Health Sciences, but again, it's kind of the same answer. I think it's really important to talk to an academic advisor, to talk to folks in the dean's office in the College of Nursing and Health Sciences, to see whether or not there are opportunities to complete, all the courses that one needs to continue to progress from a remote option. I know, our colleagues in the different colleges are going to work really, really hard to accommodate students, but it just may not be possible in some instances because of the nature of the coursework. So do definitely reach out to the dean's offices before you make a final decision about whether or not you're going to be remote or at home.
Great, thanks, Bill. This is a good question. Will students know the status of club and varsity sports before having to make a decision to stay at home or return to campus? Well, the varsity competition is certainly a big question right now. I think our athletics department is in close contact with the NCAA, who will really be offering that guidance to our varsity athletes. And really, frankly, I think the club sports will follow the guidance of whatever our athletic department chooses to do. As you can all imagine, the challenges are going to be around travel. That's not going to be easy for any team competing. The travel will be very minimal within Vermont. And then, of course, any club or varsity sport where there's close contact, which is most of them, will be tough to try to figure out how to do that best. So keep an eye out to see if we have any updated information for you about that one. But those are some challenging program areas that need more thought, as well as national guidance on it. Where are we? Where are students going to be tested twice a week? Michelle, do you have thoughts about the locations that students will be tested?
Yeah, we're in the process of establishing multiple different sites on campus. Gary Durr is heavily involved in that planning process too, if he wants to offer some info.
Certainly, thank you, Michelle. So one of the sites will be in the Davis Center. We're looking at 2 remote sites on campus using an outside tent. And we're also looking at a site in Burlington for students who live off campus to make it easier for you. So there'll be at least 3, maybe 4 sites available to students.
Great. And I think, Michelle, the next question is for you too, about support for students who might become sick, but they live off campus.
Yeah, certainly student health. We're in a position to help support you medically with advice and check-ins. Our experience this past semester has been mostly with off-campus students, almost actually fully. And they've generally relied on support from their friends and roommates. So I think we haven't really established a process for getting support to off-campus students, but.
Yep. I do know Burlington is running, for quarantine purposes, they're running a support quarantine program, which I encourage you to look up online under the Burlington's city office. So that's at least supportive of you during quarantine time. If decide to live off campus, will there be a penalty? I'm assuming that means you're choosing the stay-at-home option, but you want to live off campus. Yes, Bill just answered that previously about your CAT card will be turned off. So there's not going to be a lot of access to campus if you choose to do that. And then here's a long one about return to campus and testing from Erica H. Temperature screenings, I'm just going to try to run through this, and Michelle, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Temperature screenings we're not most likely going to do upon arrival or ever. Move in for stay in-person classes upon return, nope. How will you make observers available? Well, we're going to be hiring folks to observe, making sure the swabs are going well and keeping the lines all socially distanced. What will be the cleaning process for lecture halls? Erica, you have a lot of questions. Okay, cleaning process for lecture halls will be, certainly our custodian services will be doing that, and there'll be an expectation that students, kind of wipe off their seat before they enter and after the class as well, just to kind of be respectful of whoever is coming into that classroom next. Let's see, like what will the cleaning, yep. If I opt for mixed, does that mean I cannot take any spike resurgence? What is your contingency plan? Should we have to shut down again? I don't think we're wanting to shut down again. Gary or Bill, do you have a sense of that one? I think everybody will go remote again if we shut down.
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. Our goal is to ensure the health and safety of students, faculty, and staff, and we're taking every step that we can to do that. But as you know, this is a dynamic situation. Things are changing all the time, and we are going to do as the governor tells us. And so, kind of like in March, he said things were getting pretty bad and we needed to pivot, and we did. So it's hard to sort of answer that question, but we are planning to come back, and we are planning to do as much in-person teaching and learning as possible. But it's really up to the larger community and honestly to the course of the virus.
Yeah, thanks. And then Raph, I don't know if you noticed in the middle here, there's a question about Catamount Recovery Program that used to be in the cottages, and how will we ensure a sober living space? Well, now the priority now programmatically, right, Raph, is really trying to create spaces for isolation and quarantine. So those students will need to find a space where they feel comfortable living together. Raph, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. The Collegiate Recovery Program has actually moved and is in a new location. It has been for now 2 years, I believe. We don't intentionally advertise for anonymity where that's located, but it's no longer in the cottages. It hasn't been there for for 2 years at least.
Okay, so students who request that know about that, and
always do, and they get referred to us and placed there appropriately.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. And then what will be the accountability for students who do not adhere to the mask, only 4 students in a room at a time? Who will be monitoring this and how? Raph, do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, we can sort of share that, Annie, since it goes back to the Green and Gold Pledge a bit. The accountability, we will have staff in the residence halls as we often typically do. Annie can talk about some of the consequences with respect to the Green and Gold, but it's going to be strictly enforced, especially when it comes to occupancy limits, because what again we want to do is minimize the potential for spread in our residence halls. So we will have staff on call. We will still plan to and are going to have residence assistants, resident advisors during this semester, and our live-in staff members playing a role in making sure that folks are complying.
Yeah, and I would just add that to Raph, saying that, this is everybody's responsibility. We are all in this together now. This is not, oh, what is that person doing? And oh, my RA is going to take care of it. Like, we all have to monitor each other. Faculty, staff, students, if there is somebody on campus, we all have to hold responsibility for each other and talk to each other, educate each other about what the requirements are and about holding everybody responsible to all of this. So it's not just going to be placed on the Res Life staff. It's not just placed on faculty. It's not just placed on peers. It is everybody's responsibility to come to campus and keep this campus safe. Otherwise, we will find ourselves having to up and go remote. And I don't think that's anything anybody wants. So The accountability is really on all of us. If there are more egregious violations of the promise, of the Green and Gold promise, like hosting a large gathering, or intentionally, putting someone in harm's way, or perhaps harassing somebody who is following a guideline, those are more egregious, and those will be dealt with really quickly. They could find themselves with a fine, or certainly looking at also suspension. Like, we're not kidding about the seriousness of what this means to all of us. Any one of our behaviors could seriously impact someone who's more vulnerable. So I really hope that as you consider being on campus, you're taking this seriously. I'm done with my speech now. Isabel, in regards to the 4 people in a room limit, does that apply to suite, Raph?
That's a great question, Isabel. No, what we're doing right now is trying to analyze our suites, because they're all very different depending from one space to the other. And we're trying to determine is, do we have a standard cap across all suites, or do we do individual occupancy limits? It won't be many more than the people in those suites, but we're trying to determine that based on this individual space and sizes of each suite.
And then
the next one?
Yeah, go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, Deb's question. So what we had to do was freeze trading spaces at the moment in order to work on the de-densification plan, the reassignment of roommates, the assignment of first years, and then getting your move-in block solidified. So we're going to focus on that for the next 2 weeks, get all that done, wish us luck, in order to get that out to you in time by August 3rd. When folks return to campus, we will resume trading spaces.
Great. I'll take the dining one, which is, will there still be vegan options available at every meal? I would say absolutely. We're very committed to making sure we're still providing a wide variety of ranges of dining needs available, even though a lot of it will be grab and go. How will off-campus students be tested? Justin answered that one here. They're actually going to be an off-campus site, though, Gary, right? So students can go to an off-campus site as well?
Yeah, we're going to have a site in Burlington that will hopefully be conveniently located, so that if you just want to go there versus coming to campus to get your testing done, that will be there.
Great. Raph, the next one looks like yours in a triple. If 2 stay together, what happens to the 3rd roommate? Can they live next to or near each other?
Well, we would love to guarantee that as much as possible. The reality is it's all going to be dependent on what space we have available. So what we're doing right now is collecting all the information for anyone who wants to opt to move, and also waiting on students who are choosing the at-home option. There's no way I can guarantee that at the moment. If a space is available close by, we would love to do that. We'll try to do that. We're going to get quite into a bit of detail and nuance. Just no way to guarantee that at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Raph. And the next one, Bill, the Q&A, talks about the Q&A on the website about going back home if somebody becomes anxious or nervous. Do they have that option to do the stay-at-home option in the middle of the semester?
No, that's really not possible. There is so many complications about, from readjusting financial aid packages for students who are choosing the at-home option, to making sure that we have the appropriate classes and seats available, that, it's just not possible to have students sort of move back and forth between the at-home option and the on-campus option.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Raph, what happens to students' belongings if they were moved into their fall 2020 room? And if they opt to stay at home, what will we do with their belongings?
A great question. So we've already started to schedule meetings in order to plan to ship those items out. So we fully expect to have that list, and we'll move you from the pack and store to the pack and ship. We have to work with the vendor to see how that is going to operate. Your items are most likely in a shipping and storage warehouse right now. So we'll work with them to try to determine the best way to get you your belongings. Likewise, because I'm pretty sure this question will come up soon, once you get to campus, if your items were packed and stored, part of the staggered arrival not just is to help us manage all of the move-in logistics, including helping connect you with your belongings that were packed and stored. So that will happen throughout the process of that week.
Okay, great, thank you. Gary asks, will masks be made available? Yes, they will. Is that 3 per person, Gary? Do I remember that?
Yep, 3 per person. There'll be cloth reusable masks that you'll be expected to maintain. Some of them have UVM logos on, and there'll be other UVM branded face coverings available in the bookstore as well.
Michelle, here's a good question that I hadn't thought of. What if a student has already had COVID-19? Do they still have to go through all of this?
Unfortunately, yes. Right now, what we know about people who've had COVID-19 is they do develop these long-term antibodies, but it appears that those start to disappear after about 4 months. So we don't know yet if somebody who's already had COVID will have immunity to getting it again. So unfortunately, if you're exposed, you may get sick again with COVID at this point. That's what I think might happen.
Wow. Okay. Thanks for that information. Raph, another one about triples. If all 3 roommates in a triple opt to not relocate, what will happen? I would hope that doesn't happen and that folks are flexible with us, but you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I might anticipate that will happen here and there. Then we'll have a bit of a stalemate, don't we? At that point, the reality is that the expectation of the governor, the expectation set by the UVM Strong Working Group and the Board of Trustees is very clear. There will be no triples, so we will have to relocate someone, unfortunately.
Okay, the next question is, students required to stay home after Thanksgiving? Well, first of all, you're not required to stay home. Oh, I guess you are. I guess if you choose to make the decision to leave at Thanksgiving, you have to stay home. That is true. You can stay through Thanksgiving on campus and then continue on if you want to make that choice as well. But you won't be compensated for room and board those last 2 weeks because really we're kind of moving up the schedule of room and board, right? So that very early week before classes start, we're actually starting the room and board contract then. So that's about a week into it already. And then there's certainly extra costs going into all of the cleaning and the furniture and the signage that both Residential Life and Dining has to put forth in order to create the living environment and a dining experience that is safe. What happens within 1 to 2 months? You decide to send everyone home. Do we get reimbursed? No. What is too stressful? Student decides to go home after a couple of weeks. Well, if they decide to go home after a couple of weeks, I guess they have the option to withdraw from classes. And that's always an option for students who might feel like they just are not able to complete the semester at some point. Will students get fined if they disobey rules? Yes, they will. They could be subject to fines. I kind of explained that before. It looks like some education for low non-egregious issues, like forgetting to wear a mask. You know, that's more educational, reminders. But it could also then go from there to fines and then from there to suspension. So again, I had my speech earlier about how serious we will be taking this. Will we be encouraging snitches? No, we'll be encouraging a public health approach to the community really being all in and committed to making sure all of us are safe. And what about Zoom meeting booming? I don't think we're really using Zoom for classes though. So we're using Teams for our classes because that is the support. We have our tech folks on campus. That is Microsoft and who supports UVM. So we'll be using Teams and not Zoom. So hopefully that answers some questions there. Will students be able to eat in classrooms during class if they have to take their meals to go? That's really up to the faculty member. I would just check with the faculty member ahead of time, right, Bill? I mean, to be courteous and respectful to the classmates as well as to faculty teaching. Sometimes that can be disruptive, having taught before. I don't know if you want to say any more, Bill, on that one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a delicate balance there, right? Because we're you know, when students are gathered in classrooms, we're asking them to wear masks. So if you're eating, obviously you're not going to be wearing a mask. So I would discourage that, largely because we, again, we want to have a safe environment in classrooms, and we want students to be masked.
Yep, great. Another question: my significant other goes to another college in Burlington, I think that is. Does UVM expect us to cease a relationship? Is there a way to allow them in the dorm, such as through a pre-approved application? Wow, that's a tough one. We really aren't encouraging folks to come into the residence halls from off campus. Anybody can help me answer this one. We don't expect you to cease your relationship, but certainly we do expect you to stay safe and keep others safe. Raph, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, or Michelle from a health perspective about that, but we really are going to be pretty strict about who's in the residence halls. Do you really believe students will honor the green and gold pledge and wear face masks 100% of the time? What happens if they don't? I feel like I've answered this a couple of times already. There should be a large consequence because kids in Burlington are not doing it right now. Well, the large consequence is you could be suspended. So I really don't want to think about a larger consequence than that. But as I've said before, there are certainly, a staged process for minor infractions all the way up to more intentional violations of the green and gold promise. But I am really hoping that all of us can do this together. When can students pick up their belongings that were left there after break and are now in storage? Raph?
I think I answered that. Yeah, I preempted it and I answered it earlier. I can repeat. It's the week of move-in. We'll coordinate with you all to help connect you with your belongings that week of move-in.
Great. And will the COVID test be quick tests so results come back within a day? Otherwise, it would take so long, it would be time to retest. Michelle, you want to talk about the process of the testing?
Sure. The test, the company that we're using has quoted us a 24-hour turnaround for results. So the test samples are all going to be couriered right over to where the lab is, and we expect to get results within 24 hours.
Great. Raph, there's a question here about RAs. Will additional information be given to students who are supposed to be RAs in the fall?
Who will be RAs in the fall? Yeah, it's a great question. So a couple of us on this call right now are going to be putting some final finishing touches on an email that will go out to you shortly, sometime next week, giving you a lot more information about the RA role and inviting you to your own UVM Strong presentation with some of the folks who you see tonight, really focusing on your return to campus and the RA role, and to talk a bit about RA training.
Great, and I see Michelle already preempted a question about quarantining. Berkey, does the testing apply for graduate students as well, and where will this take place? Does Michelle or Bill want to answer that for testing?
I'll answer it. Yes, it does apply to graduate students. There's going to be some exceptions, with medical students who are on away rotations and things like that. But the expectation will be for the graduate students as well, and they can use any of the sites that are on campus or the off-campus site.
Okay. Can you waive the dorm requirement for sophomores so in the event of another shutdown, they don't have to move home again? If you do shut down, will you offer any refund of dorm fees? I'm not thinking that we're waiving any requirements to live on campus. You have one option to be on campus or the stay-at-home option, and we won't be refunding any of the room or board fees. No. Please share the presentation deck after this presentation. We absolutely will. It'll go up on the website for return to UVM in the fall website. My sophomore daughter is an RA. When does she need to report to the RA training? Going to be online. Raph, when are you beginning to work with RAs?
Yep, RAs will start, and again, we'll cover this in a session specifically for RAs. They'll start moving in August 8th and August 9th, and we'll deliver RA training in a number of formats, including some in-person, very small group sessions. We'll have some remote trainings. We'll have some individual one-on-ones with supervisors, but the 8th through the 9th, it will also allow time for any of our RAs who are coming and need to quarantine to do so in that time block. And similar to what Gary and Michelle talked about, any RAs that are quarantining will have, of course, their meals brought to them to their room and will be situated and placed until they finish their quarantine in the quarantine spaces, which is University Heights North and South.
Great. And Bill, I see a question here. Do you have a sense of what percentage of courses will be in the classroom in person?
We really won't know until Monday. The modalities that faculty are choosing are still coming in, but our stated goal is 60% of the classes will have some in-person component, and I would venture a guess that we're going to be really, really close to that mark.
Yeah, great. And who gets tested? Well, everybody. So yes, all students who are coming to campus certainly need to be tested. Undergrad, grad, everybody, commuters. If a student is off campus, in off-campus housing and test positive, will they be able to isolate in on-campus housing? You want to work on that one, Gary or Michelle? At this point, I don't think that is available. We are having conversations about where would the best place for students who live off campus be isolated.
That's correct.
Okay, good, got one. How will the recreation facilities such as the fitness center or gym be altered to maintain social distancing? Well, probably some of you might be going to, other private gyms in the area. They'll have to reduce occupancy of how many can be let in at a time. There's going to be major cleaning that will have to happen before and after any equipment is used. We have to make sure all the ventilation is appropriate. So there will be a lot. And so I think the fitness centers will be probably highly sought after, but also might not be as open as we have once seen before because of the limit on occupancy. Where are we? Fitness center. When the student is in quarantine, are they not allowed to leave their room at all? What if you have a service dog? Michelle?
Yeah, when students are in quarantine, it's the preference is for them to not leave their room at all. That's what we would love for everybody to abide by. There are exceptions for people who need medical care. And I think in the case of somebody who has a service dog, that might be an essential need that students should be allowed to leave their room if they're in quarantine.
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope the dog gets some outside time. What about students who elected to live in sororities? What if you cannot afford to pay for 2 weeks worth of lodging before school? I'm not sure if I'm connecting those two issues together. Certainly, if you are living in a sorority, then you'll need to follow the sorority guidelines that are set up for that chapter and house, which will probably be very similar to what we're requiring in the residence halls. And financially, I think you probably need to reach out to Student Financial Services about what you are able to afford before coming to school. How do sophomores get a waiver for off-campus living if they select the online-only option? I think we've covered this. Sophomores, you don't get to live off-campus if you choose the at-home option. If you choose that option, you need to be at home. Otherwise, your CAT card will be turned off. Will testing be available to students at the end of the semester immediately before returning home so that they can ensure they will not be putting their family at risk? Sure, because we'll be testing twice a week. So by the time you're at Thanksgiving, you will have had at least 2 tests that week before you go home. What day should off-campus students go for COVID-19 tests? This is for a student who has been living in Burlington since June 1st. When would we start testing all students, even those living off campus, Michelle? When do you think that'll happen?
That will probably happen the first week of classes. And so people will just come on one of their first assigned days to be tested. Okay,
so the date beginning all the testing will be the first week of classes. Great. As a third-year engineering student, can I assume my labs will remain in person and not online? Bill?
Yes, absolutely. Again, it's important to consult your dean's office just to make sure if you're thinking about that at-home option, because we really want to make sure that you continue to progress towards your degree. So definitely check with your dean's office.
Yeah, great. My son has been assigned a suite. If he chooses to stay at home for the fall semester, how will this affect his housing assignment for the spring? Well, we can't guarantee a room assignment, but he certainly can come back, right, Ralph?
Absolutely.
Okay. And can you talk about Greek life and clubs? Will students who choose to take remote classes but still are living in leases in Burlington be able to participate? Absolutely. Absolutely. Whatever our fraternity sorority life are offering in terms of programs as well as our clubs, I bet they're going to be more hybrid because they've got to follow the size of the gatherings. They've got to be able to socially distance and wear masks. So they probably will do some things online, and they'll probably do some things in smaller groups in person. Where can the slides be found after this meeting? It's on our website for UVM returning in the fall website. You can just Google that and that'll come up. I'm a student who intended to live on campus this fall, but is now planning to use the at-home option. When can I move out and retrieve my belongings from my residence hall? I think you answered this, Raph, but you want to do that one more time?
Sure. For folks who belongings have been stored or belongings have been placed into the new room but choose not to return to campus for the fall, once we have that final list, that final report of who selected the at-home option, we will reach out to you and coordinate with you whether you'd prefer to have your belongings shipped to you or you would like to pick them up.
Yeah, and then Raph, there's a good question next about kind of roommates who don't know each other, and one is really strict about following guidelines and the other one isn't. How might we help resolve some of that?
Yeah, the standard that we're using for compliance and making sure that we are all healthy and safe in our spaces is the green and gold promise. That is a relatively high standard. So if we have multiple folks or both students agreeing to those standards, then I would say that they're doing okay, because again, those standards are pretty high. So if both students are complying with that, we know that some of us, myself included, tend to be a little more on the safer side and do a lot more precaution than is required. That's my personal style. We don't need to necessarily respond to those incidents or instances, but if we have instances in which folks are not upholding the pledge, which we know will put you in significant health and safety risk, then please just let someone know and we will help you address that situation.
Yeah, and I would add to that too. I know that RAs often sit down with roommates and go through roommate agreements. This is a great conversation to have between roommates about how one of them wants to, abide by the guidelines and stay safe and what that looks like for them, and how the other one might too, and come to resolution and agreement about what that's going to mean for them being roommates and how they're going to respect each other in that way. So I think there's some proactive things that the students could do themselves ahead of time as roommates, as well as enlist the RAs to also support that.
Thank you, Annie. I will add also, I wasn't going to get into that level of detail, but it's a very helpful one to know. We actually are going to build that into our roommate agreement. So all students will be encouraged to do a roommate agreement online. We'll have to discuss part of the safety, the COVID safety 19 precautions that we outlined.
Great. Thanks, Raph. And during the school year, can students go off campus to grocery shop? Yes, absolutely. They can grocery shop. They can do kind of normal activities as long as they stay safe doing them and following the guidelines, especially respecting the guidelines in local either grocery stores or local retail operations. And as Gary mentioned earlier, Burlington and South Burlington also both have mask requirements in public spaces. Do parents need to be tested before arriving? Michelle?
That depends. If the parents are driving by car and are going to be just here for a moment, little bit of time to move the student in and then are leaving right away, the governor's given flexibility that they don't need to quarantine. But if you're planning to stay outside of that move-in process, then the same quarantine rules will apply.
Okay, great. And Raph, if a building, if our building was one which did not have any triples, will our roommate choice be affected? Probably not, right?
Absolutely not. You're good to go.
Yeah, that's great. And an off-campus student tests positive, will they have access to the special quarantine dorm while ill? Again, that's we're trying to figure out how best to support students who might test positive or become ill while living off campus. But I think that is a really good conversation that you need to have with housemates or roommates who are living off campus, and are they ready and willing to be supportive of each other if one of them does become ill, and then the others will also have to quarantine as well.
It's also, Annie, why we're stressing the importance of the at-home option, really being students being at home where they can receive the care and the support that they need.
Yeah, thanks, Rep. That's true. As an incoming junior living on campus who has signed a housing contract, is it expected that the housing contract will be upheld? Or is there a chance that students would be kicked out of campus housing? What do you think, Raph?
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time, Annie?
So it's a junior who's living on campus, and they've signed a housing contract already. And is it expected that the housing contract will be upheld? Meaning, is there a chance that students, because you have to de-densify, will you kick them out of housing just to de-densify?
No, well, here's the deal. If the student, I'm not sure which angle the student's taking, if they're interested in moving off campus because they have met their residency requirement, they can always cancel their contract at no cost before the semester starts. So if we do that before the semester starts, there'll be no fee. If we ever get to a place where we have to identify more bed space and we happen to maybe identify juniors and seniors, most likely similar to the relocating option, we will ask folks to opt into that process.
Great. Okay, and I'm just gonna do probably one or two more questions and then wrap it up. And you can certainly, we'll come back probably later in July and try to answer even more questions as we get closer to understanding what students' choices have been made and more details about quarantine and testing. But let's see, we'll wrap it up with two more questions here. If you test positive during the school year, are you relocated to a single quarantine room? What about your books, computer? So yes, if you test positive, you'll be relocated to an isolation space, and you need to bring your books and computer and some items, minimal items that'll get you through for about 10 days to 2 weeks, I'd imagine. Does anything change for housing if you're in a suite? I believe we've kind of answered that a little bit. Anything you want to add, Raph, to that to wrap it up?
No, I think we've answered that. We'll be in touch with much more clear information for folks in suites soon.
Well, here's a question about Canada, Gary. Now I'm intrigued by this one. If a student is from a drivable distance from campus but coming from Canada, are the quarantine options the same? I think the border is not open, is it?
Yeah, the border is closed right now, and right now none of the counties or provinces in Canada are included in the ACCD's, the agency's guidelines regarding safe or trusted counting. So you would have to fall into the quarantine.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I hope we answered at least most of your questions tonight. Again, we'll come back and do some sessions later in the month. As our planning continues, and I know as you make certain decisions and choices, it's great to spend this time with you. I hope we helped trying to kind of work through what campus experience will be like academically and socially and in the halls, so you can make the best choice possible. So thank you very much for attending tonight, and I want to thank our panel members who are just terrific guests and also been working really hard behind the scenes, making sure we all stay safe as we open campus in the fall. Thanks so much, everybody. Good night.